and welcome to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. This is Studio A, and it is Planet Collingwood Open Roundtable. While I try and remember, it's hot here in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, Southern Hemisphere, Sol 3, solar system. I forgot what part of the galaxy, what arm we're in. Perseus? I don't know. I haven't been to the gift shop, so I didn't get a map. I was asleep in the UFO. My name is Monty Dean, and it's an open roundtable, so if anyone wants to join me, just drop me a line and I'll add you to the call. Big thank you to Tony and Co for the last 2 hours. If you've enjoyed the last 2 hours, please go to freedomslips.com and or revolution.radio and donate what you can, because Revolution Radio Studio A and B is the longest running crowdfunding project on the internet today, because we are listener supported. Number one, a listener supported radio on the internet, I believe. So drop us a couple of shekels. We don't accept children. Well, we do in principle, but not as payment. Just putting that out there. Just $10 for a year. 4,000 people gave us $10. I believe that's enough. We'll cover a year's worth of funding, so that's always good. And then once you've done that, check out if the archives are up. I know because we've gone through a transition here on the radio station. The big chief transitioned on past the veil and is probably pointing and laughing at this point in time. Hello, Nighthawk. So I will let you know when the archives are back up. I've started to put this show on YouTube, so people can actually listen to it, because I've had friends trying, it's big words and I have to press a button and what's going on? Yeah. Anywho, so yeah. Also at the website, you can buy wonderful merchandise, caps and T-shirts and mugs and blood and guts and grease off the rod. Yes, that's a joke from the 1980s for Australian television. 3 people may get it if they listened. After all that, once you've expelled all your energy that you can spare because you've got to buy food and have electricity, because it's hot here and it's cold there if you're in the United States. Pop into the chat room with your like-minded, like-hearted, just liked people. Just, at the moment, Wild Bob and SJ, as well as Grog, and, all the cool kids are hanging out, So pop in there and have a wonderful time. Big shout out to John Z, who's coming out of surgery and recovering. I hope you needed it and it's not, an addiction that you have, because that's just wrong. He'll be all right, of course. Oh, add me. So, all right, I will. Yes, okay. There we go. Oh, and of course. Yeah, thank you. Skypeness with all its Skypiness. All right. So, buttons. And it is radio, SJ, so you can turn off your camera. SJ has joined us.
It sometimes comes on automatically,
Well, yeah.
The computer has been a little bit glitchy today, but I finally persisted and overcame the problem. And it turned out to be not a problem 100% of the time, except for this morning. And it immediately went back to working properly again. Isn't that a hoot?
Yeah, that sounds just like normally what we're going through on a frequency level, where you get the Mandela effect, the closing of timelines, just glitchiness. Who knows? Small grey aliens are trying to find out what your favorite chocolate bar recipe is. Well, it could be anything, as long as it works. So I've heard stories where someone walks into the room and go, "Okay, I have to pick up that comb. Oh, hang on, there's something in the kitchen." And then they go into the kitchen. Oh, okay, come back. Where's my comb gone? I've been away for 5 seconds. And they look and they look and they look. And 48 hours later, the comb's in exactly the same spot.
Man, I'll tell you, I have my own portable black hole in my garage. And I will put down like a 7/16 box end wrench that's really long, so you can get it into the hardest 7/16 inch hole to get that bolt out. And I've got one right, and I put it down right on my left hand side. I put it down, I do something for 35 seconds. And then I come back and I move my hand without even looking, for my wrench, which I knew where I put it, right? And nobody's in the shop. There's absolutely no dogs, no monkeys. Nothing's going to grab it unless it's me, right? And I look and there's no wrench there. And if I maintain the proper mental attitude and it varies, usually a short period would be 15 minutes, I'll go do something else and come back and the wrench will be exactly where I put it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We've been joined by John Z, who has come out of surgery. Hopefully not straight away, because you need to calm down. How are you, John?
Hey.
Hey, bud.
Oh, he's doing the alphabet. A.
A.
B. A C. A D. Anyway, sorry. Yeah. So you survived. You survived your surgery then. Yes.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. So how are your new breasts?
How am I on my breast?
How are your new breasts? It's just a cosmetic joke. That's not there's anything wrong with that. I don't want to get wokeified.
Now, come on, we want to dampen the transition.
They're fine, man.
Oh, okay, yeah, they're over there on the shelf. Yes. Well, if you're over 21, you can do whatever you like with your body. And watching, because I'm part of Int from Twitter. That's an interesting world, the old Twitter. You'll be amazed what actual people do. Where I'm turning into an alien. I don't think you need to. Where it's just weird stuff. Like putting coral underneath the skin, but on the top of their skull, so they can have horns.
Oh yeah, I've seen that before. It's a little weird.
That's new to me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm glad you're sitting down, SJ, because John and I could probably show you a lot of stuff.
You talk about surgery like that, and I'm a virgin, but I'm about 40 years removed from people that get tattoos every week, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit out of date.
Not necessarily. You're a treasure, holding up the tradition, and so we don't lose a moment in history. Because
it fit right in Japan,
That's right. That's right.
Well, yeah. The non-criminals, because the Yakuza, they have those lovely. Anyway, go ahead.
And they do have some incredible artwork on their bods. Japanese are pretty serious. And certainly more than capable of incredible art. And that's really what it boils down to.
The thing I still don't understand is obviously, we're not living in the 1800s anymore, and so many people have tattoos, but yet it's still frowned upon in modern day Japan to have any sort of tattoo showing.
Right.
Especially if in your public bathhouse or something like that.
Mm-hmm. It's very much the 1%er bikers. Everybody else was straight Jane, no tats. And you'd show up, and the effect was to shock the straights. And if you're a big-time criminal, that's the best way to do it. It tells people immediately, take me seriously. I'm pretty crazy. Right?
Yeah, and today you got 20-year-olds today that are getting face tattoos. So any 20-year-olds out there that want to have a face tattoo, I recommend the word unemployable.
What was that that freaky guy that got arrested and he had all those crazy tattoos on his face?
There's a lot now. You'll have to scale it down.
I forget his name. It was like.
There's 969, who's apparently a rapper or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, take a look at that guy, and you're just like, wow, that was so many bad decisions and drugs. Like, come on, man.
Well, 20 years ago, ex-friends of mine, like, if you passed out, they'll draw on your face. Apparently, that's now
that
fashion.
Still goes on.
Yeah, but it's fashion now in prison.
It's
you come out. Yeah, it's like, look,
Fashion
I've got
thoughts,
my
funny.
face tattoos and I can't find a job. I don't think they're linked.
Well, a lot of the face tattoos are about gaining status. It's
I
it's
think you're
so
a retard.
radical. Well, no, most of this we're talking about kids that are in life sentences. They're in there for
Well, I
life.
mean, like,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
look,
that's where they came
that's
from.
oh,
No,
that's
but
one thing, like
yeah,
if you're in prison for life and you're a Nazi lowrider or something, and you
That
get the
oh,
yeah,
swastika or something tattooed
yeah.
on you,
But if you're on
that's one
Instagram and
thing.
you've released, yeah, but if you're on Instagram and you've released one rap record on Spotify, it's kind of different from Bucko, the Nazi who is part of the White Demon gang in Pentridge or whatever. I couldn't think of any example of what you just said, but
Well,
yeah, there is a slight difference.
I was just thinking of Harry and Meg, and if I'd had any control over Harry, I'd have introduced him to the Ace Cafe in London. And do you know what I'm talking about?
Which London are you clarifying? The one in Canada or the one in the United Kingdom?
England, sir.
Okay, because there's more than one London. I'm sorry to put that out.
I know.
Yeah, I'm not allowed back there anymore.
Appreciate it. No problem.
Well, at this point in time, John, I don't think you really want to go back there because they allow grooming rape gangs for teenagers to go free. But if you say a trans woman is a man,
if you say a bad word,
yeah, on Twitter, not just on Twitter, you'll have the Metropolitan Police come around and it's like, all right, love, you've got to come downstairs, eh? Yeah, but next door there's I saw this young girl screaming as 20 Asiatic sort of Middle Eastern men went in there. Oh, see, now you've just added another charge, darling. Come on, just keep your mouth shut and come down the station and just take it like a white person with your privilege.
Well, the thing about the Ace Cafe is it's a biker bar. Always has been. Very consistent behavior. Not quite as radical as transgender facial mutilation. So it's almost a stability spot for downtown London, right?
Well, yeah, because outsiders have standards.
Right.
Actual outliers and outstanders is like, well, I reject your system. However, I'm not going to reject humanity. And I've got a feeling it's not for attention. And that's sort of the main difference where you can be an outlier. You can be different. People buy a bike and hang out with other like-minded individuals. Other people paint fluoro crap on their nose.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, having a bike at the Ace Cafe, especially a classic, allows you to look at the women if you're careful.
Yeah.
And they're worth looking at.
Well, yeah, it's like you're looking at my woman while she's wearing a tea towel for a dress and she's dancing on a table. What am I supposed to do?
She is sitting there throwing hatchets at the dartboard and hitting it.
Yeah, it's like,
That's
I mean, yeah,
unusual.
It's just, I think I'm hoping and I'm leaning towards this. We're in not a tipping point, but we're finding balance because if you've seen Ricky Gervais at the Golden Globes,
No, it didn't. Hey, tell me about that. I've heard it mentioned 20 times in the last 3 days.
Well,
so what did he do?
He made fun of Hollywood.
That's pretty easy to do.
No, with at one of their award shows and had to go at their wokeness. He did a Jeffrey Epstein killed himself joke.
Oh, did he? Did he get away? Was it a good joke?
You probably yes, it was. It's like these things don't hang themselves, just like Jeffrey Epstein. And they started going, ooh, wow. It's like, hey, I don't care. He's your friend, not mine.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you saw Tom Hanks's reaction, that's turned into a meme now, where he's sort of, ooh, and then Adam Driver, who played Kylo Ren's, just giggling away because he's ex-military, so he has a sense of humor. Okay. Another part that Ricky did was look, you live in a bubble. You've spent less school time than Greta Thunberg. When you come up here, just get your award, thank your agent, thank your deity, and then F off. don't tell other people about political statements or anything else like that, because you are living in a bubble.
Yep. Remember those Muppet aliens? And they come down, they show up, and they're looking at a radio, right? Yep. Remember those little Muppet characters?
Yeah, I think they're from Sesame Street. You know,
Yes.
Bring.
Well, Sesame Street. I want to date you. Sesame Street last year was 50 years old.
Yes, still going. And they've actually added a transgender character, and like pandering. And if I think she's supposed to be, it's 8. So now I'm sure people will start calling me a bigot, and I hate transgender people and everything like that. Like, yeah, if you're under 20,
up the Swedish chef.
Well, he's actually in Sweden. He's called the Norwegian chef for obvious reasons.
Sorry.
The rest of the world he's Swedish, but in Sweden he's Norwegian.
I actually knew a Norwegian chef, and he loved that character, and he was 55 and weighed 300 pounds.
Actually, wow. Yeah, never trust a fat speed dealer or a skinny chef.
Yeah, right.
If it's the other way around, yeah, you're fine. But yeah.
Either way.
Just a quick personal message for dear listeners. If you're feeling down, if the reality that is slowly just dissolving gets to you, go on YouTube or any video platform and put in Swedish Chef. I recommend starting with chocolate mousse. It's only about a minute long, and it's gorgeous. It's lovely. Food. Now we make a chocolate mousse. There we go. First you get the mousse, and he actually has a mousse. Then you pour the chocolate on top of the mousse.
That's such beautiful humor.
Yeah,
God, and it was so blessed. It was so uptight in the 70s, the 80s. Remember when everybody got into that gas crunch? We couldn't get any gasoline. We had lines that were miles long at the gas station.
I'm not sure about Australia, and also I was born 74, yeah. So I left the 70s when I was 6. That's just the passage of time, people. It wasn't a decision at 6. No, that's it. I'm leaving the 70s. It's a passage of time. However, I did see.
It was a close escape.
However, I did see some jokes referring back to the petrol or the gas crunch with the Middle East, like in Mad Magazine, stuff like that. They were still using jokes of Arabs and money and gasoline.
You got people in polyethylene pantsuits. This is disco time in the United States, right? Bell-bottom discos in, I forget what that fabric was, but it looked so strange, eh?
Yeah, probably nylon or something, saffron.
Polyester. That's what it is. Polyester.
Polyester, yes.
Yeah, and you know what that looks like. And it marked everybody that was into the disco scene. And that ran a good 10 years at least, 1 decade.
No, disco's only around for about 18 months as a musical force. But culturally, it still even exists today if you find it. It's kind of scary, but...
Yeah.
I mean, how big was disco? Kiss released a disco song, and so did Pink Floyd. So that's how big it was. And
God, it was fun. You know, we were bikers. We had leathers. You know, we had our own crew. And we hung out with very cool people. A lot of us were heavy into the blues. In America, it was just unleashing one incredible blues master after another, right? And then we had the Blues Brothers. I mean, that movie itself set a lot of minds down the road, right?
That actually revived half the musical cast. Their careers got revived again, like Cab Calloway, Aretha Franklin, James Brown. It was a love letter to the blues. And because it was done very well, Dan Aykroyd sat down and because he's got a degree in criminal whatever.
And he's got a degree in funny. Over.
Yes, yes. I saw him on Joe Rogan, and he's one of us. He's fascinated by the alternative
Yep.
world and aliens and everything else like that. But he
Yep.
seems to. It's interesting where there's mainstream UFO, and then there's us, because there's like the whole Bob Lazar, and there seems to be a separation. I don't know, like the guy from Blink-182, Tom DeLonge, whatever his name is, sort of in the Stephen Greer aspect, and then you dare I say, David Wilcox sort of spans across, and then you got Sean David Morton sort of at our ends, and it's Project Camelot's floating all around as well, and but
Well,
we're dealing with
it.
humans, and that's why we can't come together.
Well, if you keep your eyes open, you're likely to see something really weird. Politically, all you got to do is keep track of what they're saying and then look at what they're doing. But in terms of the rest of the world, like the animals in the world, if you watch the critters that are around you, they'll show you their secrets. And they all got secrets, right? It's really cool.
And I've heard people talk about that with some kids that have autism. Some of them not put on a show. It's like, the backstage. Cynthia, I'm going to do the push my banana up my nose trick today. So I want you to start throwing cake. It's not like that level, but there's it's a different operating system, like Down syndrome as well, where they've got that extra chromosome. I
worked with kids from the Bay Area, which was San Francisco and Oakland. And these were all kids that were basically abandoned by their parents. They were taken away. We got a chance to raise them on a old dude ranch up in the mountains in a big farm in Oroville. And one of the kids was named Kenny. And Kenny was highly autistic. It had been weeks since anybody had gotten a word out of him. And he was brought to our house. It was a big old farmhouse. And he stayed with the boys, silent. And when he'd wake up, he might eat something or might not, but he would immediately go to his favorite chair and just sit there and rock back and forth, right? Rock back and forth. And he was a kid whose mother would leave him with a pound of sugar and a loaf of Wonder Bread. That's we used to call it air bread. So here's the trick I want to pass on to you. I talked to an old charge nurse, wonderful woman, and she said, look, if you want to get through to him, sit down next to him and start breathing exactly like he's breathing and keep it up. So I sat down there with Kenny. He's bobbing back and forth. He's ignoring me as hard as he can. And I matched his breathing. And after about 2 minutes, it was pretty quick. I mean, this kid hasn't spoken for a while. He looked at me and he opened his mouth and said, "You're good."
Yeah, so like, in a way, by just matching the breathing, there's an element of matching the frequency, and so instead of being a distortion, you would have come in clear to you.
I'll tell you, it took months, but that kid came out of that hidden part of himself that, got to keep that armor around. He came out of there, and he became a little boy. I mean, he was really young. He was like 11 years old, I think, at that time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because
I had a great time with him. I taught him how to hot wire cars.
Yeah, I don't think we need to tell international.
The reason why I did it is because we had a number of vehicles that people had driven off of the paved road during the wintertime. And we had a deuce and a half, you know what that is, buried to its axles. We had a station wagon buried to the floor pan. We had a Jeep. And somebody had lost the keys to the Jeep. So I showed the guys how to hotwire a Jeep. I don't think it was that dangerous.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it's more of a survival mode instead of like, hey man, I know a guy that will take Porsches, so you just cut underneath the wire and drive off, and you'll be fine. It's more like, okay, we're stuck in the middle of the woods.
Yeah.
I remember mentioning on
Oroville farm front yard, right where the trees are over your head, right?
Yeah, I remember mentioning on the radio show. I've asked this question of people. You're fine. I know John will be fine because if you're in special forces of the military, you kind of know how to start a fire. But just like, just your average Joe or Jane, the general public, and that's not a put down because it's just there is humanity, but not many people know how to start a fire.
Wait, you know how to start a fire? I don't.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah, well, what you do is once you've broken into the drone place, you take over one of those energy direct weapons. Okay, you following me? And then
either that, or you open a guy's toolbox and grab his stash of matches and lighters.
Yeah, I can do that.
Come on, those mechanics know the tricks, right?
Well, in the army, you just tell the guy with the flamethrower to point it at the thing you want on fire. So or an airstrike. Yeah. But a lot of people. No, I'm not saying that. When I say this, when I ask these people, I don't need them to actually start a fire. You can explain to me how it can sort of work, and it's like, I'm happy with rub two sticks together. Yeah, technically you're right. You'll spend 45 minutes doing it if you're not doing it the right way. But
guys with flamethrowers always want to show you. I learned that. I'm a gunsmith, and I know characters like that. They're pretty close to the machine gun guys. You can occasionally, say, that is a really cool weapon, and they don't have to shoot it off. But the flamethrower guys, 20-foot stream of fire, no problem.
SJ, have you seen or heard the Bill Hicks routine about how the first Iraq War in the Gulf in 1990, how the military were in hog heaven? It was like, well, hang on, they're looking through the book. What's G12 do, Tommy? It just destroys everything except their fillings in their teeth. All right, pull up G12.
It helped pay for the war effort.
War effort, yeah.
Bill Hicks.
Cool. What's his G13? It's very hard to do comedy if I keep getting interrupted. Just putting it out there. It's all about timing. But the thing is, like, if you've got a flamethrower, yeah, you've got to know. Like, well, for me anyway, it's like I need to get rid of this fuel. It may explode. I need to do a job. I need a job. I'm here to do a job. I'm here to light it up.
Yeah. Well, Bill Hicks is world class, and I just discovered him. I've heard about him for years, and I finally fell across one of his recordings. Then I watched the next 20 or 30 of them, and the guy was absolutely brilliant. I mean, really, right? You go on a Bill Hicks binge.
Yes. So, especially when you sorry, go ahead.
No, you please.
Yeah, especially when you discover him. You may have heard him or seen some stuff, but when there's that very vibrational click, it's like, this man is a god. And then he died at 44? Come on. Back in 92? Oh, come on. But it's, you just watch. He did like 16 to 18 years of stand-up comedy, roughly he got up to 300 shows a year. So he just knew how to work a crowd. He just basically... He got to the point where he wouldn't even think about his set. He would just walk up and let it flow. And that's because he was doing 300 shows a year.
You bet. Well, it depends on your point of view. Like, one of the things that's hardest to do is the intimidation of an audience can be extreme. But to finally have that courage and also build up the rep and build up the ability to see your audience the proper way for good humor, good satire. Because I love somebody that thinks. Right?
Yeah. Steve Hughes, check him out. I think you'll like him. He's cool. Similar sort of thinking.
What's his topical How does he approach any topic?
Uh, he's been touted as the next Lenny Bruce, next Lenny Henry, or the next George Carlin. And as he points out, it's like, well, I don't want to be them. They're dead. He knows about conspiracy, and he just makes jokes about it. He's got an idea that we should move Israel to Australia. We can call it Israelia. Because you treat the natives like with disrespect, and on and on. It's just just check him out. He's got a great routine about gay, because the gay culture. When he was living in England, he had an earring in one of his ears. It doesn't really matter. So you can't have an earring there. In this country, it means you're gay. And then he goes, well, strangely enough, in Australia, it's usually when you've got a penis in someone's bum. That's when you're gay. Yeah.
Well, if
Pretty
they ever
serious
did,
comment. Yeah.
if they ever did move, Israel to Australia, they just have to have a rabbi bless the land, and it'll be kosher.
That's right. Yeah.
I still, to this day, I couldn't believe this. Like, I thought somebody was messing with me when they told me this, but it's absolutely true. Mm-hmm. The only difference between kosher and not kosher, especially when it comes to meat or something, like the rabbi literally gets in front of the cattle car, and they start unloading the cattle, and he blesses them as they go by. And I looked at the guy who told me this, and I said, "You're messing with me, right?" He goes, "No, that's what kosher means." What?
Yeah, I could be wrong, but halal is similar. It's if you've got someone in the religion who's got his, the right pieces of paper, he can point at certain foods and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, and they go to war against each other. By God, that I call Jehovah is better than your God, who you call Allah, which is the same God. So wait a minute.
It's quite fascinating how goofy humans are. Yet we claim to be the most dominant, smartest species.
Yeah, I once talked to Art Bell after Hawk started the station. Remember the early days in the evening? We'd have one of Art Bell's conversations on, and I listened, and I finally called him up one night when he had gotten to the point where he was taking calls on Skype, and me and Art Bell talked about God, and we had people laughing. It was wonderful. So talking about God has always been a good part of humor, right?
Well, yeah, because religion is created by man, and source or spirituality is created by source or spirit, or God. And now is that big G or little g? And so, I've had someone say to us, Stephen Fry, the comedian, what would you say if you met God? And he started spewing off this, how dare you let children, blah, 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 and all this type of stuff. I'm like, you're talking about the God of the Bible? Because, I'm sure people will switch off. Not this audience, because they know what I'm talking about, but other people. It's like, from a spirit point of view, there's no good or bad. There's just experience. And so if you're 5 and you starve to death of starvation, obviously, if you starve, the English language, it's stupid. Starve to death from starvation. Well done. But it's from a spirit point of view, if you can let go of the experience and the pain, and you can learn from the emotional side of things, it's like, that was awesome. I'm not doing it again. But most people get stuck in the third 3D level. It's like, oh, that poor child. It's like, well, you don't know. They could be burning off karma because in their past life they drove a bus into a primary school or an elementary school. You never know what's going on.
Nope. That's half the fun of it.
Yeah. Speaking with very quickly, what's going on? Like today or now with the Iran and everything else like that. I was watching a certain group. I can't say their name on air. The uneffers. That's the best way of saying it. Because we're trying to be family orientated, and you can't swear because we're on FD. Well, I think we're on terrestrial radio. Excuse me. The whole Iran thing and everything else like that. We've seen this before. We're stuck on a loop again, and that's why it's getting tired. It's like, oh yeah, there's going to be a war. Mind you, I don't think it's working because Trump apparently killed a general. People, blah 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 blah. Devil in the details, whatever. And then Iran threw some rocks close to a base, and it's like, see, we can miss you if we want to. And then, stupidly, out of left field, I know, let's shoot down a plane leaving from our own airport. Why? What?
It's a messed up world, bud.
Yeah, I know. It's like if you want a narrative, apparently Dr. Zeus is taking acid again.
Yeah.
And him dead. The doctor's dead, yo. Because we'll take out a terrorist that's not actually in Iran and he's been killing Americans. Then the left will be upset that the president killed a terrorist. Then the Iranians will, to save face and honor, they'll fire at some bases at their next door neighbor Iraq, which has some U.S. military, but miss. And then in 12 hours from there, we'll have a Ukrainian plane take off from Tehran and then is shot down less than 30 seconds later. It was a mistake. It took off from Iran. How is that a weapon? Yes, Jay.
You mentioned Dr. Seuss, and I was thinking, would you rather have Trump or the Cat in the Hat?
Trump's good. Well, I trust Trump more than Cat in the Hat.
Everybody's sort of thinking about it.
I'd rather have Trump only because Cat in the Hat only lasts until you're like 4, 5?
The age of reality.
Yeah.
I did. It's worth seeing the Cat in the Hat movie with Mike Myers, who plays Cat in the Hat, because there's one brilliant bit where it's like, oh yeah, okay, this is like a kids program, and that's the cat hat, and then a kid says something to the cat in the hat, and the cat just bends down and goes, "I will end you," and then goes back into character again. I'm like, hey, that's good. I like that. So it's, mind you, with Trump, I think Trump, is more controllable and less chaotic and psychotic than the Cat in the Hat.
It's an interesting world, eh? How is that rainstorm? Is that a big enough one to put out a few fires or what?
Well, if it got to the fires.
Oh yeah, I forgot Australia's still burning.
Well, Australia's bigger than Europe, and we have the size, the people.
Bigger than the U.S., actually.
Yeah, well, there you go. It's like the population of Los Angeles living in an island bigger than the continental United States. So, it takes a while for us to find out there's a fire going. Is that smoke?
Hey, do you think they'll actually get that railroad built?
Who knows? It's one strange thing. I've just seen on the 12th of January. What's today? My time. It's the 15th. So 3 days ago, the Prime Minister actually said the government standpoint is yes, there is climate change. I don't think he went for the whole CO2 global warming crap. But what is happening now? It's interesting where people are still arguing over it. It's not climate change. There is climate change, but climate change is natural. It's been going on for billions of years. So if we can still make the world better, and for 2 decades at least, humanity's been arguing over who to blame. And people apparently the science minister said okay, the climate's changed. The climate is changing. Let's stop arguing. And move forward. And people that have been yelling that there is climate change aren't happy with that, so they still want to argue, and they're attacking her. It's like, so instead of doing something, you want to still argue, and that's stuck in that loop.
Somebody silence this man. He speaks reason.
Yeah, and I realised that I'm with the protesters about climate change action, but don't mention global warming or CO2 because we need to cut emissions and attacks. No, attacks. I'll give you an example that I saw as a meme. Why attacks won't work. It is found out that an asteroid is heading towards the northern hemisphere, and it will hit the Earth's ground in 2 years. So what's going to happen is we're going to have attacks for 2 years, and that should solve that problem.
Good.
Yeah, they're gonna find
Good,
the hell
man.
out of that asteroid. Let me tell you.
I actually put up on Twitter just a rant of climate change natural. This 0.04 of the atmosphere is only CO2, and 3% of that is man-made, and 1% of the 3% of the 0.4 thing is what I was going to say is from Australia. And there's climate change or global warming on other planets in the system. And someone said AOC, well, we need to find and tax those other planets.
Hey, is everybody aware of the fact that when he entered the government, he was given water rights, and it's against the law, it's against your constitution to have anybody control the water. The water was supposed to be divided equitably by the state. And there are several examples where this has gone out of control and really ruined the ability of anybody to use the water in that area to actually fight these fires. So how does that ring out for you? Over.
Say that again, because Skype seems to be a bit weird, because it said I wasn't on the call and I heard you. So I think Paul's trying to join, and he has. So I'll get you to repeat what you said, but shorter, because it sounded important. But I do apologize, I missed it.
Couple of issues. First of all, when he got office, he was given a allotment of water for his own personal use. And lots of people in his government, likewise, have allocations of Australia's water, even though your constitution forbids it. And in the fire, up to this point, there's been a major problem with using water for agriculture and also for firefighting. That's what the issue was.
Over. Yeah, it's the Murray-Darling system.
What's his nickname?
I'm not sure.
What's his first name?
The Prime Minister.
Yes, sir.
Scott Morrison, or ScoMo.
ScoMo, yeah, they call him ScoMo.
Yeah, or Scotty from marketing.
Yeah, Scotty from marketing. Right on.
Yeah. Okay, Scott's playing funny makers, so...
There's been some serious mismanagement of the resource. The cutback of locals being able to fire break their property progressively, year to year, month to month, would have kept down a lot of the damage here. I think people are staggered by the amount of animals that we identify with Australia that just have gone poof. We may have... Go ahead.
Oh yeah, it's because the island has been isolated for tens of thousands of years. The ecosystem, that's why we have unique animals of kangaroos, wombats, koalas. They're not bears, they're just koalas. Just like before, I'm okay with it, but you're going to have angry Australians. Now, someone who's not angry but is Australian. Paul, are you there? Well, his photo's turned up, but Scope's playing funny buggers. I did sacrifice small animals too. Well, actually, that joke's not funny apparently in Australia because half the animals have been sacrificed.
Wait, where are you going? You told them to let's get naked and sacrifice a small goat. I said that?
No, I said we should watch. Let's watch goats men that stare at goats. I'm just watching like that. That's a better film than actually. Yeah. Not. I don't want us to run around naked, covered in blood, and praise Moloch. We're not doing that again, Terry. All right.
I'll tell you, after the 1960s, especially later, the early 70s, I was going around to see a lot of friends in vet hospitals, and we always had characters like that. That
Yeah.
was
What?
real in the 70s after the Vietnam War experience.
Like
Well,
what?
yeah.
Damien?
They're
I
amazing.
have.
They were amazing. And I'll tell you, there were so many secrets in that war that you encountered. It just changed your way of looking at anything, right? A lot of deception popped out there. A lot of people saw it for the first time and didn't believe it until it happened the next 20 times, right?
Well, that's the thing, like from just the war itself, where if you do
Yeah.
some research into it, where apparently the enemy were given the rules of combat for the United States were given to the enemy somehow, or they got it, and so that's how they worked around the rules. Uh, it was the first war that was actually beamed straight in or shown in America's lounge rooms. I'm not sure about Australia. They would have shown something in Australia, but not as much. And that's where I think that would have triggered a lot of the protests.
There,
Because
there was. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. Yeah, well, you,
There,
you
there,
you live there, you would know more.
well, there was. I gotta look it up, but there was recently. There was a movie that came out. That was about an Australian detachment in the Vietnam War. It was actually pretty good.
Oh,
Quite
actually, yeah, find
surprised.
that.
Yeah,
I
it was
wouldn't mind seeing that.
outstanding record. One of the things I do is I collect books on World War II. I started out collecting the aviation, then I got into the guys that were Marines. I started getting into Australia because Dad fought in that area, fought in the island campaign. And I'll tell you, a determined bunch of people, a lot of things, some of them horribly bad going on, and they managed to finally survive. But man, the cemeteries in Europe that are still there of our soldiers and everybody
Yes.
else
Yeah.
in some respects. Those
And
are
some,
staggering, aren't they?
Yeah, the French still remember because they and
You
that's
bet.
from World War One. There's a strange sort of comradeship or kinship with Turkey because of that's the first major military action that the Anzacs, the Australian and New Zealand Corps,
Yep.
got, and it technically is a failure because they turned up and then 9 months later it's like, oh, we're leaving, but that's because the British landed them in the wrong spot. They were off by a mile instead of flat meadow, grazing area. There were
Right.
90-degree cliffs.
Right.
And the only reason that the Australians and the Canadians and the English as well as the New Zealanders, the idea was to go through, invade part of Turkey, go through and capture the Dardanelles so they can get that waterway in to go around the back.
Mhm.
Now, the interesting thing is, from the Johnny Turk and the Aussie digger, because they dug in. That's where the term digger comes from. Is they just dug to survive.
Right.
They were sort of pawns. Like Winston Churchill was using the Australians, and the Turks were just defending their homeland. Because the whole Dardanelles thing was Churchill going, "Oh yeah, we'll go over there," and
Oh yeah,
they
I'm intimately familiar with his story in detail.
And yeah, are you a fan of Winston or not? Those
I
are
like
your
his-
only two options.
I like his quotations.
Yeah, he's not a bad painter from what I've seen either. But
Yeah.
I can understand why
He's
half
sort
of
of famous in certain circles for the amount of poison he introduced to warfare.
I was trying to say that half of
I beat
half-
you.
half of Asia celebrated when he died because of how I think it was during World War II, he asked the Australians to stay in Singapore and try and bring back Singapore. But I believe the Prime Minister at the time, John Curtin, said no and brought back our reservists or the main army to stop the Japanese getting into, through Papua New Guinea into Australia.
Right.
So it is kind of fascinating what's going on. So, woo.
I grew up in a household.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I grew up in a household that had Philippine carvings, Philippine furniture, not a lot of it, but memoirs from World War II that Dad used to get back, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, my favorite was the carved buffalo horn, and amazingly detailed pictures on that horn, right? A field scene. Rice farming is what it looked like. So there was a lot of beauty there that just got squashed. And I don't know if it's quite recovered yet. You know, it's trying to recover like a 21st century American city, right? And it wants to be that sophisticated. But we're talking about a country that still has reliable bicycle-powered taxis, right? Over?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting what's going on there. It's there's an element of technology. Like Japan in the mid to late 1800s, they stopped being isolationists, and there was a massive change from the samurai when firearms turned up. Gunpowder. The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise is a fascinating film. No idea if it's true or not.
It's a good one.
It's a good story, and you can see sort of what's going on. And if you want to delve deeper into the history, go find out what actually happened. And
yeah, I don't know, man. My takeaway about that whole movie is that Emperor was a bitch.
Well, that's the massive change, because the West ended up, and I think they show it where like the first time. I would say 1860, there's hardly anything. It's all Eastern. It's all Japanese and tissue paper and balsa wood making their houses. They have earthquakes. That's why they're made out of that crap. And then 20 years later, there's, electricity and telegraph poles all the way down the street. And there was that massive change where the culture almost got blotted out and freaked out because of the massive change. And so you can kind of see what is going on. Now, we're only got about 2 to 3 minutes before we get to the break. While I remember it, the only war memorial to an enemy combatant, if that's the right term, in Vietnam from the Vietnam War, which went on forever, let's be fair. Like Australia was 64, whatever, but the French were in there 10, 15 years earlier, is at Long Tan, which is the first battles the Australian had against the North Vietnamese. It was under 500 Australians defending 3,000, and because they fought with honor and everything else like that, that's why there is a memorial for the Battle of Long Tan. I think the rest of the war just went crazy and barbaric, but at least there's that one where. There's still ramifications of the Vietnam War in Australian sort of psyche.
Baby, yes. You got a huge population of Vietnamese for one thing.
Yeah, and that was all the refugees running away from the north when they took over Saigon and went from there.
Say what you want about the Asians, but boy, can they cook, man.
No kidding.
Oh, yeah, and the great joke from The Princess Bride. There's 2 things you should always know. Never start a land war in Asia, and number 2, don't go up against a Sicilian when death is on the line. And so, yeah.
Right on.
It makes sense. Never start a war unless you're the Mongols. Let's put it there.
I'm only half Siciliano. The rest is Abruzzese and Calabrese ancestors, right? So I've got some kind of a little bit of control.
I'm Prussian, Scottish, Welsh, and English.
And you still survive.
And I think Ostpaul's trying to open a can. That's Ostpaul trying to open a can of cat food with a microphone.
That's right.
No, that's not actually me.
It's the cat eating the potatoes out of the potato chip bag.
But your microphone's on. I don't hear him, so yeah.
Or train. That's that.
I know it's.
Jeez, this is amateur hour. What's going on here?
Anyway, we're on a break, so now everyone mute. You're listening to Revolution Radio. This is Planet Collingwood Open Round Table. My name is Monty Dean. You're awesome. Stick around for these messages, and we'll be back for another hour to just try and make you laugh, really, and share information. So stick around.
We're back, folks.
Yes. It's getting used to. It used to 50. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, revolution.radio. This is Planet Collingwood Open Round Table. I'm still getting used to the breakers, as you know, because there's usually a 30-second bumper, and then you can time it because the delay is 30 seconds. Anywho, if you've enjoyed the last hour, please go to the websites, freedomslips.com and or revolution.radio, and donate what you can for studio at and bit. Oh, see, there we go. I heard myself. Ew. Dear me. So now, blah blah blah. Now, I'll add you because you were requested. I don't like you anymore. That's it. I'm gonna have a long, hard talk with Connectivityus. She's a goddess of Skype, and her twin sons, Downloadius and Updatius, are playing funny buggers. So, where was I? Yes, please donate so we can continue on Studio A and B, and I can fill air for 2 hours trying to make you laugh and share information at the same time. It's all part of my gunning plan. Now, at the moment, I'm being joined by SJ, as you would have heard. Ostpol is in the background, and we've just been joined by Viking, and as well, John Z most likely will pop back in when he can. And Viking, how are you?
I'm doing good. Just kind of listening to the last half of your show and just kind of coming out of a really deep sleep. I mean, I've been coming into some really just absolutely bizarre sleep states and dream states as of late. There's a lot happening in the ether. There's a lot of the Schumann resonance, and it's a lot of information kind of coming in, especially this last wave. With the eclipse and over the weekend, there's a huge portal that opened up, and just getting some really interesting concepts.
Well, especially with the Schumann resonance, it started doing Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon album cover, where it's just a massive, like a centimeter wide block, and it's a rainbow down, like instead of across. Or yeah, if you saw the photo, you'll understand. I felt the shift on the weekend, and I find it interesting every time there's a shift forward on the positive side. When you come, there's a little bit of a pushback because of the way that frequency works, where there's a positive and negative. And I felt a negative. However, in this moment of time, the negative is there for cleansing. It's not for balance in a certain aspect. So I find it fascinating when these things where there's a high of some sort, depending on how you react to it with your perception, then I felt a negative response, if that's the right word. But yeah, I haven't felt that for a long time, so I don't know. I'm sensing that was part of the cleansing. I hope it was, because I'm getting tired of feeling like crap. And I don't mean like tired or overrun, but there was an actual sort of a negative emotion.
You bet. I noticed that as we came into the new year. I think one of the things that we've got to look at is the possibility of people experimenting with the 5G. Now, those kind of frequencies are way beyond anything that we've ever experienced before. And all that radiation, because that's what it is, combined with all the other radiation, is fairly serious. Supposedly they can control your mental attitude with the right frequencies and powers that these things can basically emit. And the other danger is the fact that you will have automated responses to anything in your life that's connected to the 5G network. It'll handle your scheduling. It'll handle your meal preparation. It'll direct any cleanup robots that you might have, anything mechanized that has a receiver, a communication with it. Over.
If I may, yeah. Oh, thank you. I was going to interrupt, but you stopped.
We're good at
So,
this stuff
yeah.
or what, man?
Yeah, sometimes I try. But what you just described is this idea of a smart city where you have smart meters, and for whatever reason, your fridge is connected to the internet because that's what I want to do in the middle of the night. Oh, I'm thirsty, or hang on, there's porn. So it's interesting from an Australian point of view. If you look at it from manufactured crisis by using a natural not phenomenon, a natural occurrence, because we always have bushfires here. But if you keep the water out and you're spraying, or what, there's chicanery going, scumbaggery, as Vinnie Eastwood would say. They're moving people. They even did that in Canada, 3 years ago. Remember where they blocked that? Yeah, there seems to be, they're trying to move people into what I call the Hunger Game scenario. If you've seen the Hunger Games film, it's worth seeing the first half hour so you know what I'm talking about. Don't watch all 4 films; you can probably get bored. Or you read the book. But it is like it's like the 2030 UN agenda thing where all the humans are piled into very small ghettos, enclaves. Yeah, and 90% of the planet is open bushland or wildlife, so the elite can run around naked with blood on them and praise Moloch. So it's a
strange little series, but it's not that far. Over the years, we've had 100 stories more about people surviving any one of a number of catastrophic events that end up with just a handful or a small group, a small country that's still
interesting enough. Sorry to step on you there. Interesting enough with the Hunger. Interesting enough with the Hunger Games, it is 70 years after there was a rebellion, and I don't know what triggered the system that they have where they're pushed into camps or little enclaves. I don't know if it was manufactured crisis or if there was something coming down the pike. But it's interesting that even because a lot of Australians and a lot of humanity are feeling these fires. A lot of Australians are angry, rightly so. A lot of people overseas from here in Australia are feeling it because they're human and they have a soul. It's interesting to see where it's not one thing. It's not like it's climate change and that covers everything. There was I must clarify too. Last week I did say there was 200 people being arrested for arson. That's not 100% correct. There was 200 people being arrested since September to do with arson or related stuff, where it could have been an accident or they're trying. It's not like 200 people went out there and like dropped fires everywhere. So it's interesting to see how language has been used, and you've got the. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's really. People tend to mislead accidentally just because they don't have control of the language, right? How to use it, what they're talking about, how long it lasted, how many people, how many critters. In this case, I think most of the world realizes that you've just lost close or over 1 billion critters. And we sort of liked all those weird critters, all the poisonous ones. You guys got more poisonous critter than any other place in the world, probably. But, all of us who are naturalists really enjoyed those spiders. I mean, they're fascinating.
Interesting
and every
enough,
other critter as well, including you.
Interesting enough is that they're finding other species as well. So I don't know in the bigger scheme of things. And, of course, we can talk about it on this radio station because we have it open-minded, or they're talking woo-woo and stuff like that. If I talk to normal people, they just stare at me blankly because their fluoride in their third eye is blocking it out. Where from a frequency point of view, this could be part of a cleansing, but also on the flip side, even if it's meant to happen for whatever reason in the timeline, Team Dark will use it for their advantage, where, we can clear everyone off. The thing is, I think Viking last week you mentioned where it could be a Mandela effect, and overnight everything grows back up because the planet shifts in frequency and goes sideways and changes its timeline.
Did you ever think about the balance of this planet? This planet rotates, right? And what we're doing is we're putting a lot of weight in different places right now. And that sort of intimidates me, you know, the fact that so much of this is happening. And I've had bicycle tires, motorcycle tires that got car tires that are out of balance. And it always has serious manifestations, right? When it occurs, it's quite dramatic. Wouldn't you say?
Yes. However, I think it's not the weight on the planet because it's the planet's too big for that sort of response to, say, a skyscraper. However, I would expand out that theory and the connection between planets and star, where that pull of gravity and magnetic connection can manipulate the planet.
Yeah, there's a lot of theory going on about the connectivity between us and the sun, which is our major driver theoretically, and the rest of the planets contributing.
Mm-hmm.
All of that is really fascinating. It's one of the reasons why I love Franklin's show. Here's an amateur astronomer that has really accomplished a tremendous amount. He's near a provincial college in terms of his equipment. Very sophisticated. Over.
Oh yes, I when I get a chance, I look at Suspicious Observers. Ben Davidson from, I think he's in Phoenix. He says the new Valley of the Sun. I guess he added the new, but he's in the Valley of the Sun, which is Phoenix area.
Albuquerque.
Albuquerque. Oh, thank you. Arizona.
They work together. It's not just Francis.
That's New Mexico.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Arizona's next to it. I'm gonna stop saying locations. So he's in the northern hemisphere. Yeah.
Yes,
See what I did there? Yeah.
Very close if you don't think 2,000 miles is close.
Yeah. Well, when you're speaking space,
it's ridiculous.
yeah, when you're talking about space weather. So he's from the electrical universe theory, which kind of makes sense, and how the sun. I think it does have sunspots now, but nearly for 200 days last year, it didn't have a sunspot at all, and it seems to be going into minimum, or it has been a minimum now. That sort of backs up that the planet's still warming from a certain point of view. Yep. However, they're like the CO2 is creating a shield, and so the heat can't get out. If you go into the electrical thing, now I'm not 100% sure, so I'm still doing my research. The magnetic shield around the planet and the solar system is weaker, and so you're getting more crap. That's a scientific term, ladies and gentlemen. More stuff coming in to the solar system and hitting the planet as well. And so there's more charge coming through. And then by now, normal people would be looking at me or have walked off. You've also got
taking the first step. I mean, there's a whole.
You're not normal. You're one of us. But then you've also got the placement of the solar system in the galaxy as well, where it's hitting the galactic plane. And I made a lovely joke. You've got flat Earth theory. I put towards everyone there's a flat galaxy theory.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there's more gamma rays and electrical elements. Now, polluting the planet's not a good idea. Let's stop that. But let's see what's actually going on, because to me it seems to be like a normal natural phase that's going through the planet, because it's been much warmer 400 years, 2,000 years, and so on and so forth.
It's a frequency. I'll tell you the thing that's really interesting is that all of this has happened before. Like with Australia's fire, this is the fourth one, I think, in the last 100 years, something like that. And
it happens all the time.
Yeah, and there were several that were more extreme than this one, and your animals came back. You know, it's really amazing. The recovery of your planet is so vital that it allows that recovery. Over.
Yeah, the difference is at the moment they started early, and they're attributing to climate change. And it started early and they're more ferocious. However, if you open your mind, which I know everyone listening has, you look at something's going on with the chemtrails, because that's basically sparkler ingredients, so it makes everything burn. they cut the water off at the Marlin-Darling system, as well as the fracking, taking all the water out of the aquifer. So if you take water out,
during the fire, they had major releases of water. Now that's criminal from my point of view.
yes, and so if you take the water, it's even in the Australian Constitution. Yes, Australia has a constitution. 7 people know about it. Now you know, and now you're 8. That water should not be sold or used because Australia is the most driest continent on the planet, from my understanding, and so water is life. And so by bunching it all up, so you've got multiple factors where even if climate change is still involved, if all the other governmental man-made things that happen, like the selling of the water, the cutting of funding, the arsonists, everything else out, if it was just climate change, it would have been, say, a third or even half as big as what it is now. It's still devastating to people however, like the cynical, I love doing, because I'm doing a training course at the moment, and I did all that sort of not spiel and then my cynical side comes out. It's like, well, you did move into a forest, but I go through all the other stuff first. It's like there's a little cynical. I mean, it's like, if you move to a floodplain and then complain that your houses get flooded, it's you. So it's just
talking about the insurance cost for a house out in the bush. Over.
Apparently, according to Max Egan, if you're on YouTube, Max Egan's been doing a lot of reports on it, so I've been following him, so I haven't triangulated information. Apparently, the insurance for fire in houses in rural New South Wales is very high and expensive, so people don't buy it. Now, there's higher insurance rates is because that money goes to the volunteer fire service, and so you see a massive symbiotic circle. However, it's too expensive for people, and so they don't have insurance, and also they don't pay for it, and therefore the fireys don't get that money, and so they're dilapidated. So you can see how that cycle is still going. And so it's a lot of people may not go back to the land because they're in fire-prone areas.
There's a lot of talk about relocation as a result of this. Over.
Yeah, and if you're from the New World Order bent, it seems to be going to plan. We have to do the old wait and see. There's a big thing about smoke here in Melbourne, which kind of makes sense because the fires are that huge and they've actually engulfed Melbourne, but I found them okay. But, they're selling those face masks now and people are freaking out. But it's the trick is, and I think Viking will agree with this because I got this from Andrew Barsis, the time now is don't take a side, step back and observe and just watch what's going on. And so if you pick a side, you kind of lose type deal, and just watch. That doesn't mean don't care, but be vigilant. And
I got a question for you.
Okay, SJ then.
Okay, no offense. They had a mile full of people at the Parliament building in protest over the management that led to this fire. What did you think of that protest? I think you're probably aware of it, right?
Oh, yeah, there's been protests, though, but it gets lost in climate change and CO2 and emissions. And it's like, however, I did point out, put on comedic hats, everybody. There was a protest for global warming in the middle of summer where it was 15 degrees Celsius and it was raining. And I don't know what 15 Celsius is in Fahrenheit, but
it's a little cool. Not too much. Let's see, 15 degrees. 185 degrees Fahrenheit. That's probably wrong. Over.
Yeah, your discrepancy on scale ratios, it's about 75 to 80 in between there.
Yeah, that's good weather. It's t-shirt weather, actually.
Well, it's still t-shirt weather-ish,
Yeah.
but it was up to 110
Everything
to
else like that.
115 earlier today and yesterday. So it's
You know what?
down.
I'm sure glad you are alive.
59 degrees Fahrenheit. 59.
Way to go.
Which is cool. I mean, for the States, that'd be cool.
Yep, it is. It is. Are we good at this stuff or what?
Well, we've taken years to perfect it, so yes.
Yeah, that's right. Right. We had to make the transition from Whitworth to British Standard to metric. And just blipping over all the U.S. wrenches, we got boxes and boxes of. You know, I actually like having an old piece of machinery come around to repair because I get to actually use part of an entire 600-pound toolbox, right? Just full of only U.S. standard wrench sizes, right? And taps and dies. And all
the different
stuff.
The different sizes, aren't they? Like, say, a 5/8 of an inch or whatever, instead of saying 14 millimeter.
Monty, we've got all three in Australia, so it's quite amusing. I know through experience. So yes, no, definitely all three in Australia. We've got the British one, we've got the American one, and we've also got the metric. So.
And that's why fathers and sons bond, because fathers don't get angry at their son. It's like, okay, there's three systems here, so it's not your fault. Unless I'm pointing at it and going, that one, then we're okay. But if I'm pointing at it and saying that one and you still don't know what's going on, then we've got trouble.
Oh, thank God for generations. I'll tell you, I'm hoping we have more kids in the neighborhood. At one time, we had quite a few kids, and now it's sort of tapering off. So that generation of adults are now getting to the point where their kids are in the last year of high school, maybe junior college. They're not around anymore. Over.
Yeah, but there's still an element there's still an element of population control because of climate change. We have to. The UN wants to cut the population in half in 10 years.
Well, don't poo-poo climate change too much because we are having extremely strange behavior in our weather systems. And most of this, I think, is caused by applications of energy that we're totally unaware of, or at least most of us are. Something like HARP is a tremendous influence on winter. It can literally steer tornadoes. Yeah, that's pretty powerful, right?
Yeah, well, there is... Go ahead, Paul.
We've got HARP over in WA, which is in Exmouth. So, and then we've got the Americans inland running it. So, who only knows?
Well, no, when I say climate change has been weaponized because it used to be global warming, and if you look at the end result, is the UN charges a tax on everything that's carbon. That includes you and me because we're breathing and we're a carbon-based life form. And so that's where you get lost. However, also you've got the chicane behind the scenes man manipulating it with chemtrails or geoengineering, HARP, and weather wars, all that type of thing, and bureaucracy. Like even in California's the area that they were cutting funding to the fire service and messing around. Like the jet stream keeps moving. I think that is because of HARP. You've got man man actually manipulating the weather. Also, I think because someone is in the know that this is a 400-year cycle, and they use records that are only 140, 150 years old, and so it's above average in their set of data because the cycle is longer than the data they actually have.
You bet. We have broken a couple of records just this week. We've got a coldest and a hottest. How's that grab you?
Yeah, South Australia, like in the middle of Australia, had the coldest January in nearly a century. But because that's not part of the narrative of global warming, the mainstream media didn't report on it.
Large part of this, I think, is man-driven. You know, we've had, if you take a look at how many HARP stations, air fans, we have huge areas of agricultural area, you know, valleys, plains, that have these incredible weather machines stashed on them. Yeah, and a lot of people have gone in, taken what's available, and shown you what's happening. And it's like weather machine about every 100 square miles globally. So
Yes.
you get to some dry areas, but you've seen the allocation, the area location of those weather plants, right?
Yes, I do. Max Egan actually showed them on his video
Yeah,
where they're like 200 miles radius, but they're all 100 miles apart. Like, why are they overlapping? Also, about a week and a half ago, I shared on my social media, there was a weather map, and it actually looks like the weather radar was pushing out the rain out into sea instead of allowing it coming to Sydney, because there's a perfect round line where the center of it, and it's someone in charge is allowing this type of stuff to happen.
Man, you can see the effect of it encircling the continent. And we've kept track of a lot of the changes, and they're just untypical. You know, the fact that there was a border area that the clouds couldn't come into. You know, you would have had rain from that series of clouds if you could have moisturized them. And people are advertising in Australia that they can change the weather, literally. And the same thing with California. We've got lots of people that are into weather change seriously in terms of business, right? I think the last time we checked, it was something like 3,000 industries, individuals or businesses that advertise the ability to change weather. Isn't that interesting? And yet we don't pay much attention to it because it's not a part of our particular life. Farmers would probably know more about it, right? Especially if you got to pay the guy to spray your crops. Over. See, everybody's off grabbing a cup of coffee. I don't blame them. Over.
Well, there is one phenomenon that you alluded to earlier, SJ.
Yes, sir.
We have been floating in and out of the photon belt for about 10,000 years. And
exactly.
The last 50 years, though, we have permanently entered the photon belt. We are in the photon belt, which is causing this a huge scenario
exposure
to
unknown radiation.
No, but also gamma tachyon waves, theta waves. These are all high frequency waves that are now coming in and influencing the frequency and resonation of this planet. You know, also that there is a course of action where the planet is affected with the seasonal ice melts, because what happens when you get a lot of water in the oceans, it does create a wobble around the equator. And I've noticed with the sunrise, unlike 50 years ago, the sun doesn't come up the same place every day.
The Eskimos noticed that.
It'll vary by a couple inches, and this is the wobbling. This is the Earth's wobble, and of course that will then affect, as Monty was alluding to, the jet stream, which is on the East Coast. It's the East Coast. It's between Europe and the United States. And if that jet stream ever drops, that would create an ice age in Europe, and that's kind of why certain times Europe is exceptionally cold, is because of the jet stream dropping due to fresh water melts. Also, so there are a lot of natural occurrences here. You're kind of hyping up this whole weather modification, which is partly true, but that's isolated. There is an overall effect that is occurring where our planet is going through a natural change of events just on its own. There are. I would say the HARP is isolated, but there's an overall effect that's occurring, and not only is it affecting the planet, but it's affecting how we are emotionally and psychically and physically enduring in our own life cycle.
Absolutely. One of the things that was interesting
Sorry, SJ, can I just butt in? Viking, what about if they're trying to do the 5G to keep us into this state of what they think that we should be? Or should we just let it ride and get over our headaches or whatnot?
Well, it's pretty powerful in terms of its effect on your mind and your body. Over.
I think what I'm being told is that there are elements and devices out there that you can create to eliminate these waves. I mean, I've got Faraday cages and shungite, and I've got my house and my property.
Yeah, you think about those things.
And I also have cloudbusters, and so you can create a just for conscious awareness as well. You can create barriers, but I think the 5G is more effective on the people that you have to understand. Since the 50s, the television has had an oscillation which actually creates a hypnotic state. I mean, this is not new. You watch the television, it oscillates a frequency in certain hertz that creates a numbness to the mind, and it's been with us for 50 years. This isn't a new technology. It just happens to be taken to the next step.
Yeah, Vance Packard wrote a book in the 50s called Hidden Persuaders, and he talked about the role of television for brainwashing people into purchase. Over.
No, it completely is a brainwashing mechanism. But as far as, I mean, this is what Monty was saying earlier in the show. You can't necessarily change what's around you, but you can, through your awareness, change what's around you and create safeguards. Because again, a lot of these techniques and these implementation of AI and these 5G is more or less to dumb down the populace, but you can rise above it just through your conscious awareness. You can rise above it. It doesn't have to take you over. If you're in this lower density, if you're in the 3D, this matrix, yes, it will completely, have its effect. But you can raise your signature frequency above 5G by just being aware of it and having a conscious lifestyle. Don't go into the foods and the water and the air that they're feeding you, or the the medical drugs. Don't get a flu shot. Don't vaccinate your kids. Have a pure lifestyle and meditate. You could pretty much rise above the entire. See, 5G can only affect you if you're in 3D. If you're in a higher frequency, it'll just watch right over you. So it is something you have to be extremely aware of. And as Monty was saying, be neutral. Don't have a for and against. That's not to say that I spend about 2 hours in the morning just going over my 50 channels that are geopolitical, geoeconomic, geospiritual, with my own health and body, just
right
keep
on.
a pulse. I keep what's called a pulse, five-finger pulse on what's happening. But I don't necessarily have a for and against. I just want to be informed. Being informed is your greatest weapon against this technology, against this geopolitical garbage that we are being force-fed here. Just by being aware. But I just want to say, just keep a neutral stance. Don't allow yourself to start to vet your anger. Stay neutral.
Yeah, you're basically talking about specifically what's embodied in the art of war. It's a mental activity. And when you have things that depend on it, other people's lives, your own, you really have to focus your thinking. And I believe what will happen in this 2020 period, we've got a decade ahead of us that's going to be a rip snorter. I think what's going to happen is we're actually going to learn to function together in some respects. When you get a lot of people thinking about the same thing, literally meditating on it, it causes amazing things to happen. When Art Bell was experimenting with them, it was so effective it scared him. He never did it again. And he did it twice. And both times he got the result in spades. He won a huge return on the effort. And it was so powerful that it spooked him. So I think we've got the potential for that. Over.
Yeah, they've done experiments where like 3,000 people meditated in Washington, D.C., and terrorism went down by 86% during that day.
Really?
Could be incorrect about the numbers, but there was a marginal influence by people just being in that moment of now. Also, for those playing at homes, if don't wear a tinfoil hat, that just increases the frequency. Remember those old stall rabbit ears on televisions? You used to wrap foil on them to get a better frequency. Don't put a tinfoil hat on. Go ahead.
Well, if you ground your tinfoil hat, you put a line from your tinfoil hat to your heel with a contact, copper, steel will work, but if you put that connectivity, all of the frequencies that you're going to attract will be grounded, and that removes their ability to affect you.
So what you're referring to, Monty, is back in the 80s, 81, 82, there was a movement called Transcendental Meditation. And they actually got together, and they were actually, that was the experiment that they did, where they had, a few thousand of these participants meditate. It did lower crime in that area. They're actually trying to sell themselves to put certain communities in these cities that would meditate, but that was kind of like their goal, but it never got off the ground. But yeah, that definitely has an effect. It's called unity consciousness, and where you create you take people that have a solidarity in their meditation and have a certain affluence in their course of action, and you couple them in a group, and it's called creating a super omniverse of unity consciousness. And it does have a major effect. That's exactly where we're going as a race on this planet. The more people that wake up and fall out of this matrix and into our own passion in our own heart monad, we start making decisions on who we are and reflective to the nature of our course of action of benevolence, we will create a super omniverse of unity consciousness. This is the evolution of this planet.
Hey, have you ever heard of Fritz Perl?
No.
Read his book on group consciousness, because I think you're ready for his approach to it, which was very successful. I used it myself, and it works. And it's group consciousness. And he's talking about group awareness leading to group consciousness. When you get enough people to know the straight skinny, and they can think together on it, you could usually come up with some kind of a solution, right? Especially if it's serious biz.
Well, if you're all visualizing, it's not thinking about it. If you're visualizing a benevolent course of action, it will come to pass if enough people are behind it. Well, just look at it in a negative sense. Look at Christianity, or look at Satanism, or look at Wall Street. There's enough people believing that it exists that it creates a reality. I mean, this is how powerful we are as a co-creator in humanity. That get enough people behind it, you can create any illusion you want. But then you take it to what you're saying, that you could actually create the antithesis of where people come together, say, like the old tribal, like the old tribal lifestyles, where everybody was on board, the same page. They didn't have to, there's no doubt, there's no questions. You You knew what you had to do for the group, for the tribe to survive, and you had a like consciousness. And that this was like, it goes unsaid. You get to the point where it goes unsaid, and you fall into the slipstream of benevolence, and that becomes your daily life. There's no, as Mondri's pointing out, you can't think about it. You can't have a judgment. You just have to prepare and fall into that. It's just like trying to play guitar and think about paying your bills at the same time. You can't do it. You'll be out of beat. You'll be in disharmony. You have to be in the moment of the 0 point of non-time, expressing your passion. And if everybody did this, or a majority of the people on this planet did this, I think that's where the verse 144,000 came from, is that if you had that like mind focusing on peace, we would probably overtake the dark side.
Yeah, we got to outgrow war. That's what it amounts to. The Hopi had it right, They talk about evil, war, possession. What people to gain it over.
So there's a word in the Hopi diction. It's called Koyaanisqatsi. And this really simplifies everything. You're either in balance or you're out of balance. And being out of balance is Koyaanisqatsi. So you're either in balance and you're in the tone of life and you're in the harmony and rhythm, or you're not.
I certainly feel like I am. It's hard to tell sometimes, you know what I mean?
Well, we are living in strange times, though, where there's a lot of energy shift, and I check the human resonance a lot, and I feel what my energy is. I do find it fascinating that most, not all, but most celestial movements or changes in frequency happen around the weekend. I find that sort of interesting in a consciousness way.
Yeah, I agree. I concur, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor. Now I want to watch Spies Like Us again.
Isn't that called blowing off steam, though?
Well, no, that's just that's one way of looking at it. Or if you're an artist, there's no such thing as a weekend. No, a weekend for the unemployed. The weekend is when you get to see your friends.
That's right.
Because they're not working, so.
Yeah.
But I've started to notice, like, because I'm starting a business, so I sort of have to check the Pope's work schedule. But I'll work around that, and I need at least one day off out of 7, which I do find interesting, because that's how God created the earth in 6 days, and on the 7th day rested. And most religions, I think the human body, you can work 5 or 6 days in a row, and then it needs to actually rejuvenate. So on the 7th day you can rest, and it doesn't matter what religion, or so at least. Like Sunday's the start of Saturn Day or Sunday or whatever. So
unless you're a farmer
or a fisherman.
Yeah, all right, you two. Look at me. Yeah. I get food for people.
Just blew his whole grand idea right into shreds, right? We're sorry. We didn't mean. What it is actually is you really want that Sunday, but you don't got it. So you got to learn how to work through that negative, totally tired out, got to get back to it, right? And you learn how to adapt to that.
Yes, even like here in Australia, it's not frowned upon, but the idea of a siesta or a nap in the afternoon is sort of not negatively looked at, but it's like, I'm having a nana nap, or I'm getting old. However, most of Southern Europe does that every day, and they are more productive because after a certain amount of hours, the body just needs 20 minutes to rejuvenate to get through to the night and then move forward. So
I remember I was in Germany back in the 90s, and they shut down for 2 hours. They were shut from 12 to 2. Everybody shut down. Even the banks shut down, and it was like they had their 2 hours off, and that was that actually added, as you pointed out, to the productivity of the day.
Hey, did you get the Kaiserslautern?
No.
That was an interesting part of Germany right there, base. U.S. Pretty interesting. Germany was a major. Go ahead.
I was just going to go back to the lunch hour, which is like I get at the moment in training, I get half.
Spain is what we should do.
Well, yeah, I like 2 hour lunch hour. I'm like, I like
Right on.
Germany. That's a couple of 10 cards under the belt. Here in Australia, I get half an hour break to eat, and unless you have a cafe or a food place next door to where you are, you could spend 10 minutes walking, 10 minutes eating, and 10 minutes walking again. And so it's strange.
What's the best next door to you working food place? You remember? You have a 1, 2, 3 of wonderful places to eat right next door to your shop.
Well, I've only been training for 2 weeks. So, there is
wrong person, SJ. Yeah, wrong person, SJ.
Yeah.
Monty, what are you doing? I missed what you're doing.
It's called the NEACE program, which is the New Enterprise Incentive Scheme, where basically you get about 6 to 8 weeks of training of putting together a business plan, and then if your business plan is accepted, you get support for 6 months for rental assistance and 9 months just like New Start or unemployment benefits, so you can start the business going and you won't be financially harbored. So I'm doing a podcast, YouTube.
How much will they give you for 6 months for rent?
Maybe 130 a week.
So you've got to find an office for that much money, or something in terms of shelter?
No, that's your living expenses.
Oh, so okay. How about your living space? They're going to approve that?
Well, yeah, that the rent assistance is for where you live. The rent that would be for your business would be part of the business plan and a loan, or
which could be a room in your house too. You can double tap that.
Yes, yeah, that's the goal, because I'm checking out a website that is for podcasts, and as well as I'm doing the YouTube, and depending on how big the YouTube is, but I've still got like filmmaking or writing scripts, and there's also music as well. So I'll just start the ball rolling with the YouTube, is just trying to work the algorithm to get enough subs and then enough people actually watching it and not get demonetized. So at the moment, I'm putting up these roundtables, and I think it would, for the station, I won't monetize them, but it helps me out because
please do. If you can get any benefit out of it, go for it, kiddo. We need
but it's nearly 2 hours promotion for the station, and so if for me, honorably, the station should get the money because we're all volunteer and helps out. But I can still use this because I need a certain amount of hours that have been watched, and then 1,000 subscribers. Then I can start getting monetization.
So Monty, we should have the Monty Viking hour or 2 hours. I'd be willing to come on and toss the ball, so to speak. I was laying this out to a friend of mine. It took me 2 hours to give him the snapshot of where I'm at and what's happening right now on the planet. I'd be more than happy to I've often thought about trying to get onto more venues. So think about it.
Yeah. I've written a list in my head, and I'll be going from there, because if I'm doing an hour one, if it goes for 2 hours, that's 2 weeks, and at the moment it'll be just once a week, but it could be more. It just depends on how it goes and everything else like that. So it's trial and error, and but I was in a moment of clarity and trying to figure out, like, doesn't seem to be that I'm generating a job. So what's my next step? And out of nowhere, it was podcast.
Well, again, if you're interested, it could be a live, YouTube podcast deal, and
a live stream, yeah.
I could definitely sink into it to your time frame, and I'd love to do it. I mean, just think about it. It could be of just the planetary galactic nature. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah. No, live stream, that's easy. At the moment I've got 5 subscribers. However, it still will be recorded, and I can still put it up, and so you'll be able to share it with your network of people that like I mentioned this, and they can watch it, and yeah, we can do a 2-hour speech.
I used to love it when they used to come on with you and Melissa. It'd be kind of fun to pull her in once in a while as well.
Yep, yeah, when she's free and everything else like that. So yeah, we can definitely do that. We're just live stream, and doesn't have to be video. It can still just be similar to the radio, and yeah,
people people do like it though when they're able. I watch a lot of podcasts, and the thing is the split screen with the video does seem to have an attraction for people.
Yeah. I think it's. I'm used to Revolution Radio, and understandably, it's only got a certain amount of bandwidth. However, with YouTube, because it's a multinational $1 million company, they've got much more bandwidth. So yeah, we can actually do visually, so you can see people react and everything else like that. So
and as far as having like the little buzz line that they have, it can be theme oriented. I definitely can come up with enough themes. You can come up with enough themes that we could tie up 2 hours and nothing.
Yeah. Yep, definitely, because I'm still just working out, because I'm actually recording on Skype now, and that's how I'm putting them up. Not sure, I have to figure out how to live stream, but even just, say, as an example, 10 o'clock my time in the morning on a Thursday, yourself and Melissa, we talk for 2 hours, then I can take that video and upload it to YouTube, and it can be up in less than, say 2 hours after it's finished. So from the start of the actual live, from the recording of the video, 4 hours later, it'll be up on YouTube.
And then, I mean, getting as professional as having a name for the show and having a weekly theme. There's so much happening right now that I think it would be a service to your area and to YouTube and to your channel. I mean, I could easily, fill up 2 hours discussing the current state of what's happening on this planet with you, Monty. I mean, the two of us, I think, would actually be an excellent duo.
Good show.
Yes. Yeah, we'll let the ideas bounce around the head then, because I'll add that, because I've got an idea of doing mini rants, call a moment with Monty, thinking of doing stand-up to a camera, so my little stand-up bits go up as well as doing essays called What's All That About, and one could be about climate or anything else like that. And so having this show as well on the channel, more the merrier type thing, because it's still, instead of just having 2 hours of this roundtable up and hope for the best, do as much as possible and generate subs, and then people start watching and go from there.
You could also pin the actual council as well. I know a lot of these channels will grab other people's videos and then put it under their title. I mean, there's so much that you can do. It's a whole new frontier once you start getting into it.
Yeah, it'll be links below. So yeah, in the description, have links to either the channel or the latest Galactic Council that you've done.
Exactly.
So yeah, that sounds like a plan. Excellent. We've got 4 minutes to go, and then I'm off to see what my cat's upset about, and then I can open up the doors and let the cold in, because it's very warm here at the moment. The joys of no insulation in Australia. 2020, and still it's warm, it's cold. They were built in the 60s, but really, you think we'd have cheap technology that could regulate weather in Australia?
You do.
They got rid of the asbestos though. Sorry, they got rid of the asbestos though back in the day. So no regulations on the really, really hot stuff that they built in the 60s. I agree. Over.
Well, I plan to sort of have a hobbit hole so it stays at 17 degrees because it's half in the ground.
Yep,
So,
yep, yep.
And the joy of hempcrete, because
Yep.
if I do move to a forest, I'm actually going to make sure I build a bushfire built house. So it's going to be mostly underground, and it'll have a big shutter, and actually think about, because that's one
No,
thing. Like,
no. You make an earth dome over the top so you can park a four-wheel drive on top of the roof,
yes,
and
I'll tell you
then
what's
you
really
can.
cool
Then
and
you've
things
got
we
your
were doing
shutters.
when we were building dome houses is we'd sight the dome against a southerly facing cliff or a rise, whatever we had to work with. And that keeps in the temperature. You got the advantage of having access to the sun. You can throw these beautiful porches on a dome house, right? You could live outside on a good day. I really love them. Good
yeah.
homes.
And they're about a fifth cheaper. Like
It's
my
not that
dad's
big a
house.
deal to build one.
Yeah.
One of the ways to do it is to just sculpt out the inside of your house, how you want it to look. Make a
Hmm.
little room for a couple of partitions because you want to support floors. And then you basically cover it with plastic, so that basically gives you a barrier from the concrete to the soil, sand ideally. And then you just pour it in there. You have a bunch of people learn how to lay out mesh. And by the time you get done, you've got something that's about a foot thick, at least down at the base of it, and maybe
There's
four
companies that do
inches
that.
thick on the roof. And it's all reinforced with steel. And it's
Well, not necessarily steel. Like there is the next level where they're
whatever.
using, they're using hemp and the strength of that,
Yeah,
and
hemp is
hempcrete and everything else. Like
really strong.
just search hobbit holes, and you'll start finding companies that are building it, which is like say 50. I could be wrong depending on the size of your dwelling, $15,000 to $20,000 for a house, and then you just pack dirt around it, and then you can say I'm off to mow my roof
Yep,
because there's grass on top. So.
yep.
All right, we've got 1 minute to go. So, passing thoughts, comments. Who would like to go first? SJ.
I love you all. You're an incredible bunch of people. Keep on trucking.
Thank you, SJ. Ospaul.
Pretty much similar sentiments. Hopefully the fires are going out with the rain. It's stopped
Oh,
at my
God.
area at the moment, so I'm not too sure about over Monty's, but it's pretty much slowed down here at the moment. Over.
Yep. Thank you very much. Viking.
No, I mean just stay neutral, but stay on your course of action, and it's all in divine order. Even the fires have a purpose that's playing out that we may not be aware of, but just stay calm and cool, and we'll get through it.
That is true. So stay awesome, stay balanced, and Planet Collingwood shall return in 6 days and 22 hours in our orbit, which is fictional. So I'm just going to leave the studio and go into the green room and have some walnuts. Let's be fair. And coming up next is, I think, 2 hours of Zen, and then Kelsey Sweet with Cultivating Consciousness is on in 2 hours' time. So stay fun, everyone. Remember, you're awesome, and mine's a pint.